I've been 3 days off, 3-day weekend because I'm working Saturday. So yes, you're seeing more of my face than you typically have. It could be a good thing or a bad thing. I told people about 7:30 I would be on. It's 8:30. Reason for this is we had family dinner and stuff like that, and we just all laughing and spending time with each other and stuff. But they're reading their bedtime story right now, and we're going to talk about fluid maintenance intervals. We're going to actually create a list. So if you got pen and paper and you want to write this stuff down, I'm going to be writing it with you. Also, there's a news story out right now that a undercover news crew sent somebody into a dealership. Dog hair all over me. I'm not sure what that means as muck. Anyway, there's a news crew that sent somebody undercover into a dealership in Texas, and there was a bunch of bad stuff that was put out by the news crew themselves, and there was a bunch of stuff that was put out by the dealership themselves that was bad. And synthetic version of Mercon LV, I only use Valvoline Max Life because it pretty much mixes with all transmission fluids. There's a few specific ones that they say that it won't mix with, but Valvoline Max Life is my go-to transmission fluid for pretty much anything. If I have any questions, I actually call the company up, and it's pretty easy to get a hold of them, and they will tell you whether or not it applies. So like on my vehicle, it has, I need Mercon 5, but this Valvoline Max Life also applies to LV. So I use that Valvoline Max Life in the LV vehicles if it's just a basic flush, if the customer just wants a basic service done, or I use it on the older stuff as well that's just just regular Mercon. I called Valvoline up and I talked to them, and they basically said what shop in the United States doesn't use this stuff. It pretty much is engineered to go in any vehicle. I mean, I put it in Dodge, and the Dodge requires that Chrysler transmission fluid. It does perfectly fine. I put it in any of the newer vehicles that need LV. It does perfectly fine. And I put it in any of the Panther stuff that doesn't use LV, and it's perfectly fine. Never have any kind of transmission issues at all because that stuff is engineered different. And then if a shop uses that transmission fluid and something happens to your transmission and the service is done by a certified shop, they actually allow a certain amount of coverage towards any kind of repairs if it's deemed that the fluid is what caused it. So they actually do better than most companies, and they will guarantee that if I hate this phone stand, they do guarantee that they will cover the services of the repair if we tear the transmission apart and find out it was because of the fluid was the issue. Let me get this situated here. Let me anchor this phone stand down. Okay, anyhow, that's why I like using that stuff. It's great stuff. It works very, very well, and I never have any problems with it. I've never had a vehicle come back with issues. In Texas, they had this news crew hire a mechanic. He's supposed to be a professional, and they wanted him to basically go over every vehicle that was sent through the dealership, and they were trying to catch dealers scamming people. And the guy himself had said a bunch of things that was absolutely not true. Also, at the same time, the undercover footage of the dealership saying some of the things that they said, it was appalling. So I do have to admit that the dealership themselves said some really disingenuous, basically told some lies. And I'm a dealer tech. I work for a dealer. We do honest work. We don't make recommendations based on what we think. We don't make recommendations based on how to make our pockets fat. We make our recommendations based off mileage sometimes, safety records, what has been previously recommended before, and if we can see something continuing to deteriorate and the customer still declining it, we will remind them, hey, remember last time you were in here, we looked at this and it didn't look so hot, and now you're back in here again and it looks worse than what it did before. And I can bring you out to the vehicle and I can show you what's going on. If you'd give me a few moments of your time, I'll actually show you what's going on with the vehicle. A lot of times once you get to that point and you're showing the customer what's going on, they understand and they can see what's wrong and they buy the service because they're worried something bad is going to happen. Now, there are scheduled intervals. There's intervals by mileage, and a lot of people get upset because they're like, you are basing something off mileage, but you don't physically see anything wrong with my vehicle. Yeah, it's called preventative maintenance. That's the whole reason for it. It's called preventative maintenance. It's to prevent anything from happening in the future by keeping everything up to snuff. But people often say, well, my radiator fluid looks good. It's not brown. It's not anything. Yeah, but there's an additive package in these chemicals that are put in your vehicle to have it run a certain way. And it may be fine. It may look clear. And yes, I mean, there is a chip shortage. We're having a really hard time getting vehicles right now. Even my dealer, we're a pretty good selling dealer. And we might get one, maybe two vehicles a week, not even sometimes. I'm a pain in the ass, just as I was at the dealership. I'm going to let it go and just unsub. Yeah, I mean, I get it, man. There's a lot of people that are just angry people, and if that's how they are, that's how they are. I get it. Be well, take care. No hard feelings. There's a few people on this channel that just, no matter anything that they say, it's got to be something negative. It's got to be some kind of undercut. It's got to be some kind of critique. And eventually they just go because they don't ever have anything positive to say. I get it. I mean, if that's just you, unsub. That's fine. I wish you well. This crew went into this dealership, and when the lady came back out with the recommendations, it was a female service writer. And you can tell she really didn't know a lot about what she was talking about. And she was talking in circles. And she was feeding the customer a line. And I could tell right from the get-go that this woman was not a good service advisor. She had not spent any time in the field. She was just a pusher. She was just a seller. And when she came back out, she told the lady that your power steering fluid needs to be flushed. And if you don't flush your power steering fluid, your steering is going to get really tight and you're not going to be able to steer eventually. Well, that's completely false. That's a complete line of BS. It has nothing to do with your power steering getting tight. If anything, it's not going to protect as well. The seals maybe start to swell in the future. The fluid's going to get a little burned. Other components inside the rack can wear, but the steering is not going to get tight because you've let the power steering fluid go more than a year. That's complete BS. And they caught it all on video. The service advisor was actually saying that to the customer. At our dealership, we don't do stuff like that. We do it by the book, and we have a maintenance interval, we have a severe schedule, we have the regular schedule. Most people, 99.9% of people, are on a severe schedule maintenance level. One of the things that the guy said in the video, let me see if this is the phone that I have the video footage stored on. It might be this phone here that I'm on right now, but let's see here. Let's see. Anyway, it's gonna take me a while to go through. Maybe I think it's channel 5. One of the things the guy says is he pulls out his book and he says, He says there's no reason why you should ever follow anything outside of what this book from the manufacturer says. There's no reason that you should follow anything outside of what that maintenance schedule inside the book says. But that is completely incorrect. The manufacturer manufactures the vehicle. They build the vehicles to their standards, right? And they build the vehicle long enough to get the customer through payment schedule and stuff like that, and through a decent amount of warranty time. And then after that, they can't cover the vehicle forever. Well, explain something to me. And this is what I never understood. If you're telling me that I have a transmission fluid life of 100,000 miles or 150,000 miles or 100 or lifetime transmission fluid, then why won't you guarantee that transmission for a life of that fluid then? Doesn't make any sense to me. There's no such thing as a lifetime transmission fluid. There's no such thing as a 150,000 mile transmission fluid. There's no such thing as a 100,000 mile transmission fluid. There's no such thing as a 20,000 mile transmission fluid. It's fluid that's good that goes in the vehicle, and you got to keep it maintained. There's no telling what could happen at any time. We know we have maintenance levels, and we know what general statistics show on what fluids can last in a vehicle a certain amount of time. But what that guy said about following that book to the T is not correct. And, you know, if there's some engineer or Ford or some corporation or somebody watching me out there and you feel upset about what I'm saying right now, I challenge you to prove me wrong. How many motors have I had apart? How many PTUs have I had apart? How many transmissions have we pulled out of vehicles at 30 and 40 and 50,000 miles and see fluid just completely burned? PTUs that say, you know, you can get 100,000 miles plus out of the fluid and stuff that's in these PTUs, and it doesn't last that long. You know, you're lucky if you get a good 20 to 30,000 miles out of a PTU fluid before it has to be changed. I just pulled the fluid out of one at 58,000 miles not too long ago, and there was literally chunks and metal debris from inside the transfer case itself on the actual drain plug, just a mound of it. Not just a little bit, not just covered, but I'm talking layered upon layered upon layered coming off of this plug. So these fluids don't last like people think that they do, and the components don't last like people think that they do. Yeah, maybe some better materials are used in some areas, and then in others they're skimped, but that's not the case here. So when I look at fluid intervals and what I've seen, this is what I typically recommend. You know, if I see an escape coming in or a fusion coming in over and over and over and over again, and I've got PTU leaks. If you don't know what a PTU is, it's just basically a transfer case for smaller vehicles, an all-wheel drive type system, right? It transfers power from the motor. The trans is attached to the motor, and then it has a PTU attached to it that drives the rear wheels of the vehicle. It's an all-wheel drive unit. The shows have it, the escapes have it, the fusions have it, some of the edges have it, the explorers have it. They all have it. You know, they're not all the same, but they leak fluid. They internally fail. There's a number of things that happen. Some of them have coolers on them where the coolers end up cracking for the coolant that run through the case. And it's just, it boggles my mind when they'll put a $1,700 unit in the vehicle and spend 6 hours or pay 6 hours labor to replace it, but they won't listen to us when we tell them, hey, I would really like to see you get back in here between 20 and 30,000 miles and let's change this fluid again. It's better than having to put $2,600 into a new PTU unit if we just start flushing the fluid sooner, because you have to think about this. Okay, this is going to be chicken scratch design, of course. You've got a motor. You've got transmission bolted to the side of it. So you get pistons going up and down here. You got transmission here. You got the exhaust. I'm doing it in reverse for you guys. You got the exhaust coming down the back side of it, and then right off the side of the transmission here, there's a little box. Well, if you've got the transmission here and the motor here and the exhaust coming down on the back side and the PTU sitting right behind everything, what's it doing? It's an oven. It sits there between all these moving parts and this heat, and it just bakes and it boils inside that, right? So if you've got constant heat around this case that has fluid that lubricates these moving components that transfer power all the time, do you really think that's a lifetime fluid? There ain't no way in hell you'd ever convince me that that's a lifetime fluid, and it never is a lifetime fluid. So it's not. You know, it's one of those things where people have to look at the bigger picture here. If I can sell you something and make you feel like you never have to maintenance it, and this goes for all manufacturers across the board. If I can sell you something and make you feel like you have to maintenance it less than you ever have before, that's like jackpot to some people. They feel like they can, oh man, they've made this vehicle to where I don't have to touch anything for 100,000 miles, 150,000 miles. Yeah, until it's long gone out of warranty, and then you're putting a $3,000 transmission in your vehicle, or you're putting a $900 transfer case, and then you got to put, 6 hours worth of labor to change it over. When you could have just spent the $20 for the quart of gear lube, let me drain it, and then fill it back up, or you could do it yourself. I have videos on here where you can literally do it yourself. Pull the fill plug to make sure you can break it loose first, because you don't want to pull the drain plug and not be able to put anything in the PTU. Pull the fill plug first and verify that you got enough fluid and stuff in there to begin with. It would be nice to be able to see it, or at least put your finger in the hole and touch it, and then drain the fluid. Know what your level of fluid is and put the fluid back in. Know what you have to use for that type of system. And it's typically pretty easy to do. It's just people don't think they have the ability to do it. Pull up a few YouTube videos. You'll save yourself thousands of dollars a lot of times just by doing a little bit of research, but people are too damn lazy to do it, and they don't have any confidence in themselves. Or they'd just rather let the vehicle go and spend more money on a new vehicle. It is what it is. Some people like arguing with the dealership and the manufacturers. They feel like maybe they're empowered some way by saying, oh, I got over on the dealer. I made them buy me a new vehicle or something like that. Some people get off on that stuff. Some people, they don't even want to see a dealer. They don't want to see an independent shop. They'd rather just get in a car and go to work and come home. I get that. But then there's stuff that has to be taken care of. Tip on the escapes, you put less than a quart of fluid in there. Less than a quart of fluid is what it takes to fill up the PTU. It takes 10-15 minutes to drain the PTU and fill it up, and about $20 or less for the actual fluid that goes in there. You could literally do it yourself, or you could come to the dealership. I'm going to charge you a half hour to do it because that's minimal. You're going to have a little bit of a markup on parts, and what I'm going to do is I'll charge you $70 to do it. It's going to be about $30 for the quart, and I can drain it and fill it for you, not a problem. But you have to be willing to spend that money or do it yourself to keep up on the maintenance, and people just typically aren't. They don't want to do it. Oil changes. So far, let's just start writing it down. If you have just a PTU, not a four-wheel drive unit, a PTU, I say every 20K, optimal to 30K, service it. If you have a transfer case that takes Mercon LV or transfer fluid, so let's just say transfer case. I like to see it done when the trans is done at 50K. Flush, do a basic trans service at 50K. So transfer case and transmission, 50K. I know that you guys may think that's soon, but I do this every single day. And there's a lot of guys out here that are right on board and close mileage-wise with my thinking, because we see this stuff every single day. And I'm not worried about some Yahoo on the news that's trying to point out dealerships are scamming people. We'll talk about that off of here, Bob. Transmission 50K as well. And then your front differential and rear differential. Front diff. I like to go a little bit more on the front diff because it's not being used all the time, but you don't have to do this. You can do it when you do the rear, just to make things easier for yourself. And there's two different things that you need to know. What type of fluid you have, and if you have a locking clutch system in your differential. So some of the F-150s have a plug, a green plug that you can look at the rear diff, and the F-250s, the F-350s as well. You can look at the rear differential and see if there's a green plug plugged into the differential housing. If there is a green plug plugged into the differential housing, you have, and it's typically seen from the driver's side, you can look through the driver's side wheel well right at the pumpkin of the differential housing on the top. You can see that there's a green plug there. If you see that green plug there, it's a electronic locking clutch system. So you don't want to put in a Ford rear end a fluid that has friction modifier in it. It specifically states in the Ford manual, do not use a fluid with friction modifier in it in a clutch type, electronic clutch type Ford differential. Now, have I seen guys put like a Valvoline 75-140 with friction modifier in there and nothing ever happened? Absolutely. I've never seen one fail by actually putting friction modifier in the differential with an electronic clutch lockup. Never seen it. And I've seen plenty of guys, DIY guys, do it when they never had an issue. But Ford in the manual, it says don't do that. Now, regardless if you do or you don't, I've never seen anybody just a standard Valvoline pre-mixed 75-140 with friction modifier, never seen it fail. But the manual says to use a straight gear oil rated for that differential without friction modifier in it. Now, if you don't have a green plug going to the rear differential housing, that means you don't have an electronic locking clutch unless you've modified it yourself. It's an open differential, and at that point you can put a 75-140 with friction modifier in there. It's fine. So front and rear diff, 60K, 70K. I'm just going to put 60K, the sooner the better. You know, oil is cheap. These parts are not. So whenever you can get in there to do it, do it. And it typically takes about 2.5 to 4 quarts. Most systems do with front and rear differentials, depending on what you're working on. Now the bigger differentials and the heavier duty trucks, they take more than that. So PTU, transfer case, transmission, front diff, rear diff, brake fluid. Years ago, they would say every 3 years, and it was an industry standard for people to do brake fluid every 3 years. But as time passed and they realized, it's not that they didn't realize, they were seeing how many brake failures were going on. 30K is not a bad interval. It's proactive. You're being a better owner than most people by keeping up with that stuff. So I love it. I love people that service their stuff sooner, like me. I don't wait like on this paper. I put on here transmission and transfer case at 50K. I don't wait that. I do mine at 30. I do not wait 50K because I don't want problems. But 50K would be a good general recommendation for somebody that doesn't want to drop, $240 on a full-blown transmission flush every 30,000 miles. It's up to you. 50K would be a regular trans service that I would do by then. Now, brake fluid. It's hydroscopic. What does hydroscopic mean? It absorbs moisture. So you can take a thing of brake fluid and dump it into a jar that you can see and leave it open and let it sit out in the open with no lid on it, and come back a week later after you put your little mark on it to begin with and see that the fluid rose. Come back 2 weeks later and you can see it actually increased a little bit more. It's because it absorbs moisture in the atmosphere and it reduces the boiling point. So I would definitely consider doing your brake fluid by the 1 to 2 year mark, not 3 years. I like to do my brake fluid once a year because it's nothing to play with. And the better the fluid's getting, the more synthetic the fluid's getting, the higher boiling point, There's a reason for that. It needs to perform at that level, right? So I would think taking care of the fluid and keeping it fresh would be beneficial to us. Now, a lot of shops still go to that 3-year mark. I don't believe in that. Optimal is 1 year, max 2 year for brake fluid. Now, power steering. Power steering, that fluid is always getting worked when you're driving, right? That pump is always running. So I would think if you wanted to go by years, I would say do it the same time that you do your brake fluid, 1 to 2 years, or 24,000 miles, whatever comes first. And this is all stuff you can literally do yourself. It doesn't have to be a complete flush when you're doing this stuff. So when you're, just say for instance, you're starting out with a power steering flush and you have one of them suction devices that you can get off Amazon for, what, 10 bucks, 12 bucks? Suck out what's in the reservoir and dump some fresh power steering fluid in there, run the system. Let it run and mix in for a little bit, right? And then maybe do another flush. Suck the reservoir out and dump some more power steering fluid in there. Freshen it up some. Give it some life back. It doesn't have to be a full-blown shop quality flush where we're running cleaners and everything else through there. It's not necessary. Freshen it up. Give it some of that strength and stuff back after time. So it doesn't have to be a complete flush every time you do fluid services. I'm going to keep rolling with the fluid stuff, guys, and then we can come touch back on the questions, and I want to answer those, but if I get off track, it's going to be like all the other videos where it's all jumbled up, and people are really here for the fluid stuff and then the questions at the end. So if we can save the questions to the end, that would be the best way to do this. So I got the PTU fluid 20 to 30K, transfer case 50K with the transmission, front diff and rear diff 60 to 70K, depending on whether or not you're working that system. If you're working it, like somebody said, and you're towing it, consider doing your services sooner. Brake fluid 1 to 2 years, power steering fluid 1 to 2 years or 24,000 miles, whatever comes first, because remember that pump's always running if you don't have one of these newer EPAS systems. Now, if you have electronic power steering assist, which that started really becoming prevalent in vehicles from like 2010 on, a lot of vehicles had all kinds of power steering assist in all different types of models and makes and everything else. You don't have to worry about power steering service. What are we missing here? PTU, transfer case, transmission, front diff, rear diff, brake fluid, power steering. Let's touch engine oil real quick. Now, my rule of thumb for engine oil is 3,000 miles. If you're doing a lot of in-town driving, a lot of short trip driving, 3,000 miles or 3 months. I know you don't, a lot of people don't like to hear that, but it is what it is. It's 3,000 miles or 3 months. I don't like going to 6 month stuff with vehicles that sit. It doesn't really last very, very long. Maybe 6 months max, but that's it. I really don't like to see that. Engine oil, 3,000 miles or 3 months. It seems like a lot, but you'll thank me in the long run. But if you're driving the vehicle, if you're driving it highway driving a lot, 5,000 miles max, or 3 months. I don't like this 5 month stuff I've been seeing pop up. Now, something interesting that I've seen here is there's been a new guy popping up on my feed on I'm not seeing what the questions are. Yeah, includes filter. I mean, it filters a few bucks. Put it on there. Unless you got one of them really high-end filters that say they can go. I mean, people can do whatever they feel like they need to do. Barry, if you want to change your oil once a year, by all means, that's on you. If you've got your vehicle figured out and you're happy with that, and you think that that's okay, then you do what you got to do. I don't recommend that. I don't recommend anybody changing their oil once a year. It's just something I don't. It doesn't matter to me. about what people drive, you have to realize that additives have a shelf life. They fall out of suspension. The older they get along with the oil, the less they protect the engine. So there's a reason why I recommend 3 to 6 months instead of a year. I've had vehicles come in. I get it. Mobil 1 full synthetic, I get it. It's a great oil. But I wouldn't go a year. I wouldn't do one time, a year. I would do it at least every 6 months, minimum. Okay, so where was I? So engine oil, 3,000 miles or 3 months for people that don't drive a lot and they do a lot of short trip driving. A lot of short trip driving really kills oil. It doesn't let you burn off the moisture and stuff that's in there. There is fuel dilution and stuff that happens. You need to be able to get that stuff out of the oil and get the motor hot for a long period of time, for at least a decent amount of time, to get that stuff cleaned up inside there and get the additive package moving through there. Get those additives, lubricating those seals and stuff like that to keep them alive. If you're short trip in the vehicle, you're not driving the vehicle a lot, you're just starting it up every once in a while. Seals start to get dry. There's a number of things that start to happen. And then people wonder why they're getting lifter clatter and lifter tick and stuff like that. You don't drive the vehicle. Nothing gets lubricated. I mean, it's not rocket science. And 5,000 miles for the people that are always doing highway driving. The reason I say that is because they're really moving fluid through that motor, and they're really letting that chemical package, that additive package, do what it has to do to keep that motor clean, so you can go a little bit longer. Remind me on the coolant thing. Do you have to stick to manual oil interval recommendation? Let me see this here. Do you have to stick to the manual oil interval recommendation to keep more? No, you can. No. If you go into a dealer, and a dealer tells you you're changing the oil too soon and you're paying for it, what you do is you tell them, it's my vehicle, I want it serviced, please service my vehicle. If they turn down your service, you go somewhere else. There's not a manufacturer on the market that says you have to wait 5,000 miles, you have to wait 7,500 miles. That's all a bunch of hogwash. And when dealers do that stuff, there's a reason why they're doing it. When independent shops do that stuff, there's a reason why they're doing it. If you're paying for your stuff to get serviced and you want it serviced at 3,500 miles, get it taken care of. So on the engine oil thing, there's somebody's I have about 8 quarts still. Will it last until the next interval? I'm not reading all the comments, so when you guys are like asking questions and then you're following up. What is this cat doing? The cat caught a locust. The cat has got a locust back here on the floor and she's pawing at it and chewing on it. I don't care what she does. She can do her thing. I ain't bothering her. Anyway, maybe I should just take that thing and throw it outside. So there's been a channel that's popping up on my feed every once in a while, and I think the name of the channel is called KOJO, KOJO, and he's an Asian guy, and he shows pulling these Audis and these really nice Lexuses and stuff into his stall at his job where he works, and they are very, very, very meticulous overseas when they service people's vehicles. I'm gonna just get through my thoughts and stuff like that, and then I'll answer more of the questions at the end. If you're asking about the new coolant, it's VC13G, and it mixes with the orange, but the orange doesn't mix with the yellow, from what I understand. Or if you're gonna keep it orange, keep it orange. But the new upgraded stuff that mixes with both is VC13G. They want you to go that you can take the VC13G and mix it with the orange stuff, but they don't want you taking the orange stuff and mixing it with the 13G there, which makes no sense because they're both compatible with each other. If you can mix the yellow with the orange, then you damn sure can mix the orange with the yellow. It's just the yellow was supposed to be the newer updated stuff. I'm here. But anyway, this new channel that's called KOJO. I'm watching these guys, these Asian guys, and I'm very interested in how clean their services are. When they pull a vehicle into the service bay, they do it very slow, very methodical. It's right on point. There's no revving it up. There's no speeding. It's very nice and easy. Pull it into the service bay. Immediately before you even touch the vehicle, you pop the hood, but before you even touch the vehicle, you get a big giant fender mat, and they lay it across the front of the vehicle. So they are not putting their paws on the vehicle. They are not touching the vehicle in any way that it shouldn't be touched. And they wipe the top of the engine down. They blow everything off the top of the engine. They spray like a cleaner on it to make sure everything's wet and can't go into like the oil cap, and then they wipe it down. And then before they even start the service, they get a little can of like a what do you call it, a motor flush. It's like a can of motor flush, and they just dump it right in the motor, and they run it for a few seconds to clean everything out while the customer's there. It's just something that I've seen them do, like almost on every single video. They do a quick little, probably non-volatile flush. They drop all the oil and stuff out of it. They put the plug and stuff in. Everything gets wiped off. Everything gets methodically put back together, and it's a very nice, everything you touch, it's just wiped down, and it's very, very clean through the entire process. There's no rushing. It's very step by step by step by step to make sure that the customer gets the vehicle back 10 times better than how they gave it to them. It's called KOJO, K-O-J-O, I think. And this Asian guy is just, he's on point with every single one of his services. It's very clean, very methodical. And every motor that I've seen him change the oil on, it's got a basic quick flush before he's even done the oil change. And I'm like, wow, you're talking about service, man. That's some darn service right there. But you're changing the oil on Audis and really nice, higher performing cars and stuff like that. They really go out of the way to do that. Now, somebody mentioned coolant earlier. Coolant, they say, is 100 to 150,000 mile type service now, right? But I don't believe in that. If I'm doing my coolant, I'm going to go ahead and do it at the same time I'm doing all my other trans stuff while I'm there. I don't want to have to come back and do this again. I think between 60 and 70,000 miles is a good recommendation for just a basic coolant exchange. No issue there. Keeps everything fresh. And if you have a Panther Platform car, I got a little trick for you to change the coolant very, very fast in that vehicle, if you have the machine that I have. I have a coolant exchange machine, or a suction machine. And basically, what's a good brand to flush with? BG is the best stuff on the market. I mean, BG is the #1 flush on the market, but they have liquid moly and, Marvel Mystery Oil. You can run in like the last 50 miles or 100 miles or something like that. If you just wanted to do a decent cleanup before you change the oil, Marvel Mystery Oil would be good to top something off. But my favorite thing on the market is BG by far. It's the strongest stuff on the market, but you got to wear gloves when you use it. And it's a 1200 RPM, engine hot, top off the engine oil with the EPR, and then flush it all out. MMO viscosity, I think that you're replacing one of your quarts with 1 quart of Marvel Mystery Oil. if you're gonna run it through the full cycle, like they say. Mystery or Marvel Mystery Oil, yeah. I keep saying Mystery Marvel Oil, and then everybody gets all butt hurt and uptight about stuff. That's that's optimal right there. I mean, we say 5,000, but they say if you're doing like, you can go up to 7,500. We want to see the customers by 5, but I really love it when they come in by 3, 3,500, 4, as long as it's before 5. Um, I think somebody looked this up before when I was in one of my live streams, and they said it's equal to like 5 weight oil. Yeah, well, it cut for a second and came back on, so it's late. I think several people are on their phones right now, laying in bed trying to wind down when probably should have the phones put down already. But yeah, so it's something like, so like you said, like 4. So we just say we'll call it 5. It's just easier to just say 5 weight. Um, on a diesel, a lot of guys are saying they go 15,000 miles. I like to see the diesel trucks back in by about 7,500 to 10,000 miles on the diesel engines. Guys don't like that. Guys that are running the road all the time, they're transporters. I mean, maybe they can go 10,000. Um, but the diesels, I typically like to get in between 7,500 and 10,000 miles because of the amount of oil that they actually have in the system and how large the filters are. They can go longer. But the most recent engine that we had that it just idles on the property all the time. It's completely sludged up. The motor's gone. It needs a new motor. So there's a reason for that. The rusty tools. Let's see. And there's a lot of, it's fizzing. It's fizzing a lot. And there's like flakes of rust floating around inside the vinegar. Oh, you guys got to see this. I got to show you guys this. Look at that. Clean that whole entire spot right there. That whole section right there. Just clean the rust right off of it. Look at that. The whole thing now. And this has only been a couple hours. Look at that. That's pretty neat. I feel like a scientist digging for artifacts here. That's pretty cool. It just keeps taking more and more and more off of it. I'm going to leave it in here and let it go. Just let it sit. Anyway, so there's something to that. You can buy a, what did he say? You can buy a dip to recoat your handles on the channel lock. They sell it at hardware store and Lowe's. We'll see what Anyway, so outside of what we've already covered, there were some questions about maintenance stuff. I've seen some stuff pop up about F-150s and things like that. So what were the questions again? Can we ask them one more time? And I apologize that I didn't answer them earlier because I just didn't want to get off track with it. Somebody was asking questions. I've heard about people say that they've run 5W30 in the 5.4 Triton free valve because it helps with cam phasers. Is there any? I mean, it just helps with clearance issues. So you got to think about how many 5.4 3 valves are out on the road. You know, you run 5W30 in there, and it's going to help quieten some things down. It's going to help the motor run a little bit smoother and stuff like that because there's obviously some wear there. Anytime you add thicker oil to a system, you'll always run the issue with clearances, right? But we know 5W20 and 5W30 almost lay on top of each other. You almost have the same protection range and stuff like that, except 5W30 bumps out a little bit into the higher temperatures. I don't see an issue with running 5W30 in a 5.4, just for the simple fact that it has the same winter weight. So on startup, it's not going to be an issue. It's just when it actually gets moving and it's hotter, it's going to expand to that 30 weight instead of a 20. A lot of guys like running 5W30 in the 5.4 3 valves, and they do say that it quietens things down quite a bit, and they notice that it runs a little smoother. So I don't think that's a myth. I definitely think it's possible, and it does sound legit. I just don't have a 5.4 3 valve to tell you whether or not that's true. .2010 Ford Taurus it's a great vehicle. As long as it was kept up maintenance wise, it's a phenomenal vehicle. Good motor, good trans, but you got to find one that has been maintenance. Just general questions, Patrick. I mean, you can bring something else up but most of these recommendations pretty much apply for most manufacturers as well. It's just people, you know, from Toyota and stuff like that, they're fanboys, and they typically don't want to admit that going 10,000 miles on a Toyota motor is not the brightest idea, but yet they brag about doing it anyway. And Toyota, over the last few years, has been constantly talked about for oil consumption issues, oil control ring issues. How can you tell if you need a power steering pump or the rack? Well, there's a number of things. If you've got clean fluid in it and it's bled out and it continues to whine all the time, then typically there's some kind of issue with the pump. Like I bought a brand new pump from Napa on a customer's older car. They didn't want to buy a Ford pump. I put it in a 2002 Lincoln Continental, and it was still making noise. It wouldn't clear up. It wouldn't stop whining. It had hard spots every once in a while where it didn't want to steer right, and I could never get the air out of it completely. It seemed I thought it was my fault. I thought I did something wrong. And then I was like, man, I've bled this thing over and over and over again with weight on the tires, with weight off of the tires, lock to lock. I never had an issue bleeding a power steering pump, but it would never stop whining, and it would never stop with these intermittent hard spots when I would go to steer, Sure enough, I called Napa up and I said, I'm going to warranty this pump out and send me another pump. And I put the other pump in it, and it all cleared up and went away. I just got a bad pump. It wouldn't stop whining. There was like intermittent hard spots. Now, if I would have put that new pump in there, I've never really seen a rack go bad. Like, unless it was just abused and beat to shit, you know what I mean? I mean, normally it's the pump leaking itself, or the pump is bad. But I've never had a rack go bad on me, so it would be hard for me to say how to pinpoint whether or not the rack itself was bad. I would say that if it was binding all the time and the fluid was good, the pump was good, then you would know you definitely have some kind of rack issue or some kind of suspension component binding when you're trying to turn, like the steering shaft. A lot of times people will mistake the steering shaft going bad for a power steering rack, and that's not the case. It's the steering shaft itself, the intermediate shaft going from the steering wheel down to the rack, that starts to bind up because one of the U-joints get a little bit too much rust, and you'll get intermittent hard spots while you're turning, or sometimes they'll just start to seize up completely, and it's not the rack at all. It's actually the two U-joints, or one of the two U-joints in their intermediate shaft. Oh yeah, I've had plenty of issues with the electronic power steering racks. I've had them, a lot of them, between 2010 and 2012, or 2008, 2012 Fusions. There was a huge issue with COM codes. Then you have to drop the whole rear of the subframe. You have to feed the E-Pass out, feed a new one in, reprogram everything. Some of the Tauruses would come in, the 12, 13, 14 model Tauruses, even some of the 15, if I want to say 15, it would make a screeching sound whenever you go to turn. You go to turn the steering wheel, and it go, and you go back the other way, and it make the same sound. You take a little bit of silicone spray and you spray it right into the end of where the actual intermediate shaft goes down into the E-Pass system, and it would go away for a little bit. But after a couple days of driving, it would come right back. And that worm gear that sits in the top of that shaft assembly starts to dry up, and once that starts to happen, it's kind of hard to save it sometimes, so you end up having to replace it. Mainly, there was an issue with the Ford programming and the way they were built between, I want to just say, just roughly 2008 to 2012 were most of the major issues. And then you have to order like a $1,400 rack, and then you pay 3 or 4 hours labor to have it installed. Some of them were covered under warranty, some of them were not covered under warranty. And then they had extended programs that they put on them, which would be something like 10 years or 150,000 miles, but a lot of people were outside of those warranties, so they never really got covered. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the super chat. Is EPR okay for use in EcoBoost motors? Absolutely. No, you're fine. The EPR does not eat away at seals. They guarantee their fluid. It does not do any of the stuff that people are talking about. I even took one of the seals that go to the VCT solenoids on an EcoBoost engine and dropped it down in the EPR first thing in the morning when I got to work, and I let it sit there all day and then pulled it out, and was actually messing with the rubber and stuff on it, and didn't get any softer at all. Nothing happened at all. Now, one could say, well, when it's heated up, it acts different. Well, you're right. But I'm not going to put a hot plate there and let it boil all day with a seal in it and try to figure out what happens. I've never seen one come back leaking after you run EPR through it. No issue at all. Yeah, we haven't had any of the racks go bad yet on ours. What's the 5 best looking Fords? 5 best looking Fords. Y'all are gonna hate me. I love the Fox bodies. I've always loved the notchback Fox bodies. I think it's one of the best looking Fords to me. A lot of people disagree with that. I like the old 65, man, 65, 67, maybe 67 Mustang, 65 Mustang, somewhere in there. I forget which one it is exactly. I like where there was like little changes that were made. if I'm even remembering correctly. I like the OBS Ford F-150s, the 250s, 350s, and then I really like. I like the way these new Explorers look. I'm sorry. I think it's one of the better looking SUVs. I just don't like all the cop car problems that we've had with them. I really like the newer Explorers. I think they're kind of unique. They look sporty. They're not that classic, they're kind of fitting into the nicer style that some of the other manufacturers like the Telluride and stuff, but they're not quite as nice as them. Yet they're not as gaudy and ugly as some of the earlier models. So I really do like the newer Explorer look. I just don't like the issues that I've had, all the issues with the cop cars. Um, let's see. And I like the body style of the second gen Mustang. I feel like I really do like that. But my favorite vehicle and look overall is probably the earlier model Mustang or the notchback Mustang. It's my favorite ones. No, it's not just because I would like to be a technician on those. I like the Ford GT, but it just doesn't suit me. None of those. My 85 T-Bird, I think it looks pretty cool. I like the way it looks. I definitely, because it fits in the Fox body category. That's why I like that. I do like some of the Chevy products. I like the last gen Silverado, the way it looked. I don't like this new one. This new Silverado looks like complete dog trash. Um, I like their heavier duty line trucks. They look pretty good. Uh, I like the older Corvette look and the old early Corvette look, but I don't like this new Corvette look. It doesn't do it for me. One of the coolest cars that I thought was really nice was the Malibu that looked like the G8. I really like that four brake light setup and then the really nice aggressive look to that Malibu that they used. It was like almost similar to the Pontiac G8 style. I really liked the look of that car. It always fascinated me when I seen that car, and it reminded me of the G8. After watching one of your videos, I was going to try BG Molo, but I'm scared it may loosen up too much sludge and clog up the variable valve timing filters or oil pump. Car has 175,000 miles. What do you think? Well, it's not the MOA. MOA is the additive that goes into the fresh oil that mixes with it, and it coats the metal as a protective barrier. The EPR is what you're talking about. That's the flush. So you put the EPR in, you run the vehicle for about 10 minutes at 1200 plus RPM or 1500 RPM, somewhere in there, and then you drain the oil, and then you put the MOA in with fresh oil, and it coats the metal and treats it. Kind of gives it like a protective barrier, and that won't loosen up anything, but the EPR is. And there's always a chance if your motor is really, 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 really bad. There's always a chance that you could flush something out and it could clog something up. You're absolutely right, but I've never seen it happen. As long as people keep up on maintenance and as long as it's a pretty healthy motor, if you can open that oil cap up and you can look down inside there and say, man, it doesn't look too bad, it looks pretty clean, more than likely you're fine. There's always a possibility. Can't ever count that out. It's the 2 bottles I used on the Ford Escape, correct? Would I ever drive a Ford Mustero? Ford Mustero. What does that even? Is that like the slang name for it, or was there actually a thing called the Ford Mustero? Is this like a trick question? Oh, so this is like some kind of concept that somebody made. It wasn't actually, was it a Mustero pickup? It's kind of ugly. No, I wouldn't drive that. No, I don't. It's kind of ugly. It wouldn't be my thing. So those of you that are looking to see what it is, I'll show you if you haven't seen it. Yeah, I'll pass on that. What do you think of the look of the 02 to 09 Trailblazer? They're decent vehicles. I thought they were a little too bubbly, and it's not something that I would not typically something that I would drive. But I mean, I don't think they're bad looking vehicles. 2017 Ford Falcon. I don't know. We don't have those here in the States. No idea. I mean, are you asking about look? Let's see here. 2017 Ford Falcon. Oh wow. Ford Falcon XR6 is a really nice looking sporty vehicle. I kind of dig that. And then the Ford Falcon looks like an El Camino. That's not my thing. It's kind of ugly. The bed in the back is kind of big. But whatever that XR6 was, that was pretty nice. The Ford Falcon. There was an XR6 that wasn't actually a full bedded. It actually had like a back seat to it or something. This is called the Falcon FGX. This is a pretty sharp looking car. New Ford Falcon 2021 for overseas. Now I wish we had these here in the United States. These are nice. These are really cool looking, and they look like nice little sports cars. That's a pretty nice car. Sporty. Looks like a version of like a Fusion and a Focus ST kind of like mixed together. Looks kind of cool. But I don't like that one. It looks like an El Camino. On the Euro design Fords versus Americans for 13 plus tour. I think the European design vehicles they look a little bit more sportier than ours. Ours are still kind of like old and outdated, and I really don't like how our vehicles haven't really caught up to the sportiness of a lot of the stuff overseas. Not something I'm a huge fan of. I wish we would have put more of that technology and time and sportiness into some of our vehicles here. Some of them are nice, but I feel like people overseas definitely get a little bit better, sportier options than we do. Have any Mach-E's rolled through the shop? No, not one single Mach-E has been to this dealership for service at all. I like the new ones. I think the new ones have enough of the retro and enough of the modern to make me happy. I think they look pretty cool. They look pretty aggressive. There's a lot of power. They outdo any of the Jeeps off-road through any of the testing, like any of the independent YouTubers or like truck sites and stuff have went and tested. The Broncos have excelled pretty much past anything else off-road wise. The maintenance intervals that we talked about in the beginning of this video would be the best thing for that Explorer. And if it only has 18,000 miles on it, don't be afraid to do an induction service every once in a while before you start getting carbon buildup on the valves. Appreciate that, Jason. My first car was an 89 or a 90 manual Ford Festiva. Our Festival FK thing beat Mustangs. It ran on it ran on Marvel Mystery Oil and luck. Festiva. Yeah, I had a 89 and a 90 Ford Festiva, and I dogged the hell out of that thing. It would never quit. Voltage regulator typically. For the 2004 Ford Lincoln overcharging, 17 volts. So I've owned this vehicle for about 2.5, 3 years now on my Lincoln Town Car, and within the first 6 months, the alternator started overcharging, so I had to get rid of the alternator. And then what I ended up doing was I put a new alternator in it. Like I went and got a Napa Premium, blah blah blah. It was a super freaking expensive alternator. And then what I did was I installed the alternator and I ran an extra ground cable, which you can find in my videos. It's in my library. I added an extra ground cable to the stud of the alternator to tie into the ground of the battery, so I can cut down on some of that electrolysis that ends up happening in the coolant. And that's where a lot of that corrosion buildup and stuff starts, and where a lot of the leaks start, is because the vehicle is not grounded properly. Lincoln Town Car is the most reliable vehicle. Yeah, the dogs are all over me, man, all the time. This girl, she's always around me. She's always sitting at my feet. She's always on top of me on the recliner. I can't get away from this dog. She doesn't see me all week, so whenever I'm here on the weekends, she's literally on top of me. We have low inventory, honestly. We have a lot of, we have used cars still, but it's hard getting new vehicles. Yeah, the new F-150 is great. You just have to make sure the programming's been updated, so it doesn't do that, the whole... I had my first 2021 F-150 with a 5-liter come in not too long ago, and Ford has a special program that you have to go in and reset the computer in order to start the vehicle, because if it gets a quart or more low and 20% or less oil life, it disables the PCM. You have to go in with a special program to wake everything back up in order to reset the oil life, so you can get the vehicle back in the shop to do the reprogram and change the customer's oil. Do you recommend changing fluid in the transmission of the first-gen Fusion? Of course. Of course. If it's been taken care of and if the fluid's got a nice smell to it, it doesn't smell burned, I would definitely change the fluid. There would be no hesitation there, but just, you don't need to do a full flush most of the time. And a lot of these transmissions, you have to think they have internal filters. Like some of these CVT transmissions and stuff like that, you can't service them. You just have to change the fluid. Eventually, it'll let you know when there's a problem, and unfortunately, that's just how they make them. There's nothing that you can do to alleviate that other than split the trans, take the filter and stuff out, and most of the time when you do that, you're looking at an overhaul. Thank you, I appreciate that. The 2006 to 2012 Fusions were the best Fusions they ever made. The 3-liter Vulcan, the little 4-cylinder, the 2 point, what was that? Didn't they make a 2.3 and a 2.5 or something like that? I mean, somebody corrected me in the last video and was like, no, you got your liter wrong. It's a 2 point this, or I was like, whatever, dude. I mean, I'm not gonna get everything right. We don't ever see problems with them. I've only had to do one water pump on them, but typically when they come in, they're stout and they sell right away. They do not sit on our lot. Somebody typically comes and buys it for the wife or the daughter or something like that, and the vehicle is gone. It does not sit on our lot at all. We had a guy come in a few years ago, and he specifically was asking for a 2010 to 2012 Ford Fusion. He would not buy any vehicle from us if we did not have one of them, and he wanted to pay cash on the spot. We didn't have one. That's all he wanted, and that's all he came in for. 2010 Escapes are reliable, but the frames rot out on them. the front subframes will literally rot in two. We have them coming in the shop all the time where the front subframes are split, and then you have to replace the whole entire front frame. They're very easy to rust out underneath, along the side skirts and stuff. And if you're looking at a hybrid, every once in a while we'll have a hybrid with like cooling fan issues for the hybrid battery or something to that extent. But then you're talking about, you know, $250, $300 for a kit, and then, you know, about 2.5 to 5 hours depending on the shop, or maybe 3 to 5 hours depending on the shop to replace the fans for the batteries. But other than that, they're really reliable vehicles. They just rust out very, very easy. And a lot of people complain to me all the time about the suspension parts they're always having to replace on them. It's the motors and the transmissions are great. It's the suspension that just falls apart on those. I drove a Chevy Colorado. Yeah. Rich, I hear you. That's what I was talking about earlier. A lot of times it's because the manufacturers are recommending lifetime fluid services on those PTUs, and they're not. It's a 20 to 30,000 mile service on the PTUs, and that's it. I mean, there's no arguing that. It was a 2.5 or something, and it was in the 2010. I get my liters mixed up sometimes. The Ford Fusion between 2006 and 2012 is actually my favorite as well. It's not just what I think, like opinion-wise from the customers. It's my actual favorite out of them also. Transit Connect trans went at 47,000 miles after being rebuilt under warranty at 42. No help from Ford. Ooh, that's rough. The Taurus that had the recall or TSP on the subframe mounts. I've never done a subframe mounts on them, so I don't really know. I would never wait 125,000 miles to do a service even on a manual trans. Chevy Colorados are alright. They're kind of ugly to me, to be honest with you. They're alright though. Some of the, like the Z71 package Colorado or whatever it's called, I think it's a Z71. It's nice. Would I personally buy one? No, it's not my type of truck. They're slow. They got no balls for me. I mean, they do have a Duramax version that I hear is really, really nice, but it's in a complete league of its own. It's not even like the rest of the Colorados. I've seen your video about the induction service. Should I inquire at dealer or independent shop? What mileage and how often? I mean, because of how dirty the EcoBoost engines are and how much blow-by and stuff they have and how much oil is actually retained and pulled back into the intake manifolds, I would still try to do an induction service every 10, maybe every, it's hard to say, 10, 15,000 miles. I mean, I'm trying to put all this together as I'm doing it because I'm newer to do the induction services. A lot of people say, you know, don't do the induction service because you're going to push stuff into the cylinder and it's going to push it into the turbo. Well, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't do it, then what do you have? Build up on your valves, poor fuel economy, poor performance, possible valve issues closing all the way. I mean, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So the sooner you can get it going and do it routinely, the better off you're going to be. Then you prevent any of that stuff from actually coming off and ending up in the turbo or in the cat or somewhere else. I mean, it's not rocket science, and people have to understand, if you don't do it, what are you going to do? You're going to get 150,000 miles out of the vehicle like this last lady did, where the ring lands and stuff started seizing up. I mean, she made it to 190, but most vehicles, when they start having those issues, they don't last that long. Maybe 120, 130,000, and they're already getting rid of them. They're no good. They're junk. They don't run the induction services from the beginning. That should be a part of a maintenance program with Ford, but they don't do that. me see here. Have you ever have to break down and fix gasket leaks or rebuild the Duratac 3-liter V6? I haven't tried the AT205, but I recommended it to somebody, and they actually said it worked. They said the oil leaks reduced quite a bit. Now, for how long though? You know, yeah, a lot of people say, yeah, it'll stop some stuff now, and until you do the oil change and you got no more in there, and then all of a sudden it starts causing problems again, and then it's worse than what it was before. So yeah, it's a temporary fix, but it's not a permanent fix. And I've never resealed one of those motors. I did do a water pump and timing chain job, but that was it, and it was a nightmare. I've never really had to do any kind of serious repairs on that motor. Never. No induction service on dual injection. You don't need to do that. You're fine. But this is not a, that's not what the question was about. The induction service was on just the standard EcoBoost direct injection. Yeah, I'm a vet, for sure. JLT. JLT is the one I'm the most familiar with, and a lot of people love JLT catch cans. You can walnut blast a direct injection engine. It's just a lot of work. I mean, you have to work on getting the if it's a four-cylinder EcoBoost, a lot of people take out the radiator and stuff so they have enough room to slide the intercooler and stuff forward, because it's all part of it's all part of the intake manifold type system, right? So in order to get the intake manifold off to get to the valves, you have to remove the intercooler from the front of it, and a lot of times there's not enough room. Guys end up having to pull out the roll restrictor to tilt the engine a certain way, and then get themselves more room, and then they end up banging up the radiator and the cooling fans and stuff. So they just pull all that stuff out of there, pull the intercooler out of the front. They lose some coolant while they're doing it, and then they pull the 8 and 10 millimeter bolts out of the housing that hold the the intake manifold to the front of the head, and then they can walnut blast it. But it's a pain to do it. It's not a fun job at all. And then you can do it on the F-150s and stuff as well, but that's taking apart the whole entire center valley of the engine just to get down in there and do it. It's not worth it. At that point, you may as well run cleaner through there every 10,000 miles. Keep stuff clean. I wish they would come up with a retrofit kit or something like that, so you can actually add your own induction, your own like periodic mist spray or something like that into the system, where it could actually self-clean as it's doing it, like an additional kit to the EcoBoost engines. I thought about doing it, and I thought about trying to come up with some kind of like throttle plate that will go behind the throttle body, and it will have like a couple little small mist injectors, and you can hook up some kind of system where periodically while it's running, you could on like a time type schedule or something like that, every once in a while blow some cleaner through it to actually keep things clean, so that way it would never build up. But I don't know what it would take to get a system like that built. I don't think anything about a 2005 Scion. Sorry. Snow injection makes a plate. Well, I mean, there you go. I am. I believe in God and all that other stuff. I just don't practice like everybody else does. I have my own way of doing it. I don't go to a church every week, and I'm not a Bible thumper. I mean, I believe because of certain circumstances, and I do periodically open the Bible and read and stuff like that. I'm just not as a hardcore believer as everybody else is. But I believe in my own specific way. I don't know very much about methanol injection. I'm newly over the last few years trying to get into the performance stuff. Should you remove the catch can when going in for services at the dealer, worried it might affect my warranty? Well, if you're worried it might affect your warranty, I think you've already answered the question to that. I cannot answer that question. I'm not liable, if you catch what I'm saying, to answer that question. Yeah, 2017 and up is when they started doing the dual injectors. So, yeah, Well, I've never really had any problems out of them. It was the 2016 was the first. 2016, I think, was the first issue I had with valve stem seals. I had to replace a cylinder head on one. I had to replace both cylinder heads on another one. And I think I did a third one. It's been a while where I had to do cylinder heads because there was like some kind of manufacturer issue with how they were built in valve seals. But 2017 and above is when they started that dual injection. Ryan, yeah, I mean, I plan on it. Ryan, if we're talking about the same Ryan, he's got a kit that he's putting together for me, and he wants me to do timing chains and all that. So yes, I am. I'm going to do his timing chains. I'm going to get that hooked up and nice and clean, sealed back up. Get that rattling to go away. Check the 6.0 Power Stroke meth injection systems used on the drag trucks if you're trying to play with 3.5 liter Duratec engine. Great engine. Bottom line, great engine. How you doing, Mac? Appreciate it. From New York City. Or the N54 BMW forms explain meth injection is great. You can use a reputable oil filter. So not an orange can. You're not going to put an orange can on there. You're going to put something good like a ultra synthetic, Fram ultra synthetic or a Fram titanium would be fine. It's better than OEM, but there's nothing wrong with the OEM filters. I would try to stay with an OEM Ford filter while you're under warranty. Those filters are phenomenal. It's the best designed factory oil filter that I've seen so far on a factory car. Yep, Iraq, 10th Mountain. Pepsi. Coke, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Pepsi. I'm not a Coke fan or a Mountain Dew fan too much. Ford 50 over a V6 EcoBoost, 100%, hands down. Is there a recall for electronic display in 2017 F-150? Not that I know of. I mean, what are we talking about? The shift points? I know there's a technical service bulletin that says something about reprogramming the PCM for shift points, or something, not your selector lever not showing up in a right spot whenever you're moving through gears or putting it in park, but it's not a recall. I can't say anything about that, Rick. I'm not going to comment on I can't comment on aftermarket parts put on a vehicle that's still under warranty. I can't tell you what to do, especially while we're on live. There's definitely something I wouldn't talk about on live, so it's asking for me to get in trouble. It's not something I want to do. Mercury Sable or Lincoln Town Car. Okay, I know a little bit about the Sable. I know a lot about the Town Car. (2017) F-150 base 3.5 V6 thoughts on it. A phenomenal truck. 3.5 liter V6 and an F-150. Although it's a 300 horse motor, never have issues with them. Customers come in, they use them for fleet work and stuff like that. As long as the maintenance is kept up, we never have issues with them. Never. They don't have the cam phaser rattles and all that other stuff. None of that stuff. They run great. What's up, Canada? In the new Rangers, no. I haven't seen any carbon issues. The only thing I found with the new Rangers is we had a couple come in because there were some issues with the HVAC box. Customers trying to switch between different modes and the doors and stuff get hung up. We have to pull the dash and everything out, replace the HVAC box. One lady came in and said, I got hot, but I don't have any cold. Another lady came in and said, I have cold, but I don't have any hot. And it all came down to there's an issue with manufacturing of those boxes. So we've done a couple of those boxes so far. The heater boxes, but other than that, they don't come in for any problems. Project Farm? Stuck, rust, and strip bolts. What's your process when about to work on older vehicles? Grab you a can of Panther piss and pray over them, and do the whole spray it down, heat it up, spray it down, heat it up, spray it down, heat it up, cool it off. If you're not a tree hugger, get you a little can of some kind of AC and right on the bolt. If it's just a quick one, get it nice and hot, hit it with some AC, make it nice and cold, almost freeze it right up. But no, seriously, rusted bolts are a thing of a specialty for most people. I use a lot of heat when I'm doing suspension work, a lot of heat. A lot of times fluids and stuff won't do it. It just literally needs to come down to the damn torch, unfortunately. I don't think they're really gonna do the whole GDI thing anymore as much as solely on its own. It's gonna be a combination. They realize how bad it is just running GDI. So I've got the 3.3 F-150. Love the 3.3 is awesome. No issues with the 3.3 F-150 at all. Guys, I'm just going to come out and tell you right now, if you're putting aftermarket parts on a vehicle where the people that make the aftermarket parts don't just come clean and say does not void vehicle warranty, you've already answered your own question by saying whether or not it needs to come off before you take it in. I don't have to answer that for you. I'm just, you know what to do. Do you think the 3.5 EcoBoost phaser issue is due to the start-stop system? No, I don't. I just think it's a poor design. They're trying to get it worked out, programming, whatever it is. Nope, no work on the 7.3s yet at all. They haven't been into the shop for any kind of engine issues whatsoever. Oil changes, that's it. 6 bed bolts and 3 neck bolts, and the plug for the lights and lift away. Do most Taurus cop cars you see have the 3.5 twin turbo or the 3.7? The 3.7. 3.5 non-turbo or the 3.7. A lot of them are 3.7s. Yeah, so even though you'll see people do a lot of testing and stuff on in their garage or their extra room at the house or in the kitchen or something like that, you do have to realize that that doesn't always apply to reality. Elements, how the vehicle's been run, how long it's been rusted like that. I could put something out to rust right now, and it's not the same thing as something that's been sitting out for 30 years rusting. It's a much deeper, magnified version of what's going on. So even though we watch all these videos and stuff online that show us rust and things like this and how to get things apart, all of these scenarios are not covered by all applications that we see in our life. So although at face value a lot of them are really nice and they do help, there's a huge majority that don't get the help from those videos because their situation is completely different. It may, to an extent, do something to maybe move them in the path of the right direction of getting something apart, but it's not ultimately what helps them get the stuff apart. 2020 Edge is a nice vehicle. Really nice vehicle. Well, the GDI stuff now, you have to realize that all the newer vehicles are port injected and they are direct injected. They have double set of injectors. So if it's because of how dirty the engine is, that shouldn't be a concern so much anymore, because they've really did a great job on cleaning up the valves on these newer engines. If you look at the cop car I just did, where I replaced all of the port injectors and all of the direct injectors, plus all the gaskets, all the high pressure lines and stuff, because of some kind of issue where it was flooding on startup, they just were throwing stuff at me and said, look, man, just go ahead and replace all the injectors, all the plugs, direct and port, and let's see if the issue goes away, because nothing was pointing out what was going on other than multiple cylinders flooding on startup. And sure enough, it was some kind of bad batch of injectors. I replaced all the injectors and stuff like that. But while I was in there looking at those valves, I was like, man, this is really nice, the fact that they actually cleaned all this up. There's no more valves being gunked up and stuff anymore. At 20,000 miles, the valves still look like they were brand new. And there's none of that stuff going on anymore. I have a 2017 Lincoln Continental 3.7 liter V6 all-wheel drive, 16,400 miles. Does that car have the PTU issues? I know you said on the Explorer's Flex PTU get heat soaked. Yes, it does. All of them need to be serviced sooner. All of them. No, there's not a vehicle that Ford makes that doesn't need to be serviced sooner than that. 20 to 30,000 miles, service it. Service the all-wheel drive unit. Do you see issues with the 6R80 and the newer F-150s if people wait to change fluid? I would say yes. You still have the shuttering issues. You still have the delayed shift. There's a hunting scenario every once in a while, depending on what gear you're in. I wouldn't even mess around with that. I would still do the fluid changes sooner. Rusty tool check. You want to see it again after it's been sitting here? Let's do it. Man, it's really, really, really bubbling. What did somebody say here? PTU service often only holds like 12 ounces and is surrounded by heat. Absolutely. 2003 Cadillac CTS with a TBI throttle body. I've never seen that before on a modern car. It actually blew my mind when I found out. Wow. Yeah, it blows my mind. Should I sell my 2019 Edge 2.0 so I don't get stuck with the carbon deposits? No. I mean, it's a great vehicle. The 2.0 did early 2019 to mid 2019 is when they stopped with that coolant intrusion issue, so you could still be liable for that. I mean, I don't know what the dates completely are where they cut off in 2019, so be checked on technical service bulletin for that. I do have it up on the channel. You just have to type in coolant intrusion in the library, and there's eventually I go over one of the technical service bulletins where I cover all the dates. But they're still good motors. The problem is once you start hitting 120, 130,000 miles, the carbon deposits really start to affect the vehicle. Sometimes sooner. It's just a matter of, are you doing induction services, cleaning every once in a while, even if it's light, even if it's just a CRC mist every once in a while through the map sensor, just while somebody's got their foot on the throttle, kind of increasing the throttle a little bit, and just spraying some CRC induction turbo cleaner or something through it, just to do some kind of cleaning in general could help. But that's starting now before it gets too bad, and then you have to worry about blowing deposits off. Yeah, I mean, it's a common thing in the Ford realm with the PTUs. Nobody specific, has to really point it out. It's all the Ford techs know that you cannot wait. 2008 Explorer. The only thing I had to do change on my 2008 Explorer was change the factory ball joints at 280 kilometers. Yeah, I know everybody's referencing this walnut blasting stuff, but that's a lot of work to walnut blast. It's a lot of work. Yeah, a lot of dealers they won't do the PTU fluid change because either they don't know how, they don't want to be reliable, or they don't want to be liable on something. You bring it to me, and I'm changing it. I'm not gonna say no because I know it needs to be done. The, let's try this out here. Let's do the opposite side. Let's do this side. I didn't touch it yet. Look at that. That's crazy. The stuff is just melting off of there. Look at that. Look how it's just melting all that stuff just straight off of there. All the rust is just coming right off of it. If you're just tuning in, you don't know what this is, just sit back and relax for a little bit. Don't start talking trash and doing all that other stuff. We got some white vinegar here. And we got a super rusty tool that's been sitting outside. And we're trying to see if this distilled vinegar actually does remove rust like everybody says it does, or like people have asked me to actually confirm whether or not it's true, and it's true. It does. It's only been in here for, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours now, 2.5, 3 hours now. And the rust is just melting right off of this thing. So I figured I'd just do a quick wipe down real quick. Get it as clean as I can right now, to drop it back down in here and let it sit and get the rest of it. Somebody said rusty tool check. Well, I'm giving you guys what you asked for. And now I get a little satisfaction out of getting some cleaning done tonight. It does work, that's for sure. Oh wow, that opens so much easier than before. ASMR baby, get that good stuff. Well, just after a couple hours, you've seen how nasty it was before. It's actually taken off a lot of it. You can actually read the name. You can actually start to read the name on it now. Better than before. That's pretty neat. Look how clean that is compared to what it was. Put it back on the counter and let it sit. Well, guys, that's pretty much all we have here, unless people have questions. I'll answer a few more questions and then let's get out of here. 4.6 valve, great motor. One of the best motors ever made. I'll eventually get into trying some of this other stuff, but you have to remember that a lot of the videos that I do are just for the normal person. They're not for somebody that wants to go get out batteries and hook up positive and negative cables to a metal can to electrify everything, and they don't want to do stuff like that. They want simple stuff. So I try to fix that first. Here's an oddball question. Any idea why the diff cover for a 7.5 rear end is way more expensive than an 8? Ooh. How did you come up with that one? I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah, supply. I have no idea. I like the Ford V10 motor. The only issue that I have with the V10 motor is exhaust manifold studs every once in a while, and I think that's pretty much the only issue I've had is exhaust manifold studs. Best Ford motor, 4.6 2-valve, gas. Best diesel, 7.3 power stroke. Damaged the engine? It possibly could long term, yes. Short term, just waiting for parts or something like that? No, not really. A lot of people think just adding oil stabilizer to the motor alone fixes the cam phaser problem. Some guy even said that I fixed the cam phaser issue by putting 10W30 or something in my vehicle or oil stabilizer, and it fixed the problem. So now everybody thinks that that's what you got to do. That's not even true. No, you're talking about the best motor. What is, to me, and the reason for it is the efficiency behind it and how easy it is to work with, is the 4.6 and the 5.4 2-valve. Now, one of the strongest, coolest, dependable motors would be a 300 straight 6, but best, no. For efficiency and stuff, no, I wouldn't. Performing, yes, but best, no. What's up, man? The 4-liter, a lot of people say it's bulletproof because of how strong they are. But to be honest with you, I've seen quite a few of those Jeeps where they have like head gasket problems or oil pressure problems. My service manager actually bought one. It's in, I wouldn't say it's in mint condition. I would say it's in excellent condition. The rockers are not rotted out. It's still all one solid color. It's been lifted a little bit. It's got like 33s. It's a gorgeous vehicle. Some of you guys can see it in my library if you look up at what the I made a video what the Ford employees drive or something like that, and that video is in there. And I show the vehicle, and it's gorgeous. It's an absolute machine, man. It is it's a unit for sure. But you know what I've seen with them is coolant issues, coolant leaks, head gaskets, and oil pressure problems. But they're few and far between. I haven't seen them enough to say all of them or a majority of them are like that, but I've seen my share of them. I like the way they look. I would love to buy one. The 463 valve and the 543 valve, they're great performing motors. They're actually pretty peppy, nice performing motors for what they are, but they're just too unreliable for me. I mean, they're with the issues with the spark plugs locking up in the cylinder heads, and some of them blowing plugs out of the heads, and uh, it's just not for me. The 2.7 in the new Bronco hasn't shown any problems so far. The 4.0, I love the 4.0. A lot of guys prefer the 3.0 over the 4.0 because of maintenance, and they say that the 3 liters are more reliable, but I don't see that. I see the 4 liters are actually little torque monsters, and they run very well. You're welcome, Ryan. I mean, we haven't got to the bottom of everything yet. I mean, just as we go through things, it's a step by step by step process. You know, it's working through things slowly. Any issues with the 504 valve? No, I mean they're noisy, they're clattery. People don't like the fuel knocking sound from time to time, and they complain about the noises all the time. But I've not really seen any real issues with them. Um, you know, when they get up in higher mileage, 100 130, 150,000 miles, a little bit of oil pressure loss sometimes, but a lot of people remedy that with oil stabilizer or thicker oil, like adding a quarter 50 weight Lucas or just Lucas oil stabilizer to an oil change, and brings oil pressure back up and takes some of the clattery noise away, instead of putting another $7,000 motor in the vehicle. So I mean, it's just 5 liters a noisy motor. People hate it. They hate the noise, but they like the motor. Earlier 2004 Ford Tauruses, I didn't have a lot of experience with, but I've met some guys that complained about head gasket issues with them, but then I've met a lot of other guys that say there was really nothing wrong with them. You had alternator problems, just basic problems from time to time, little electrical gremlins from time to time, but that was it. But I did meet a couple technicians that said they had to go through quite a bit of head gasket issues with those. Oh yeah, the front and back chain. The older 302 was bulletproof. You could dump whatever you wanted in there. You could go get a jug of maple syrup and dump it in the old 5.5 roller motor. Just dump it in there. It would eat it. It didn't care. It'd run all day. How long have I been in specifically a Ford tech? 8 years now, 7 years now. Before that, I was all international, Mack, Peterbilt, farm equipment, conveyors, Volvo. We did everything. Old car restoration. Lived at a man's house doing nothing but restoring like old 1958 to 1966 Thunderbirds, old 3-deuce Cadillacs, Oldsmobile Starflyers, a number of things. Worst Ford vehicle ever produced? Worst Ford vehicle ever produced. Outside of, most people would probably say the Pinto, I would say Tempo's up there for sure. That's a hard one for me. I would say probably I would have to say the Tempo or it's hard, man. Probably the Tempo or the Topaz would probably be up there. worst engine to avoid for problems and money? Ooh. I would have to, yeah, I would have to say the 6.0 or the 6.4, to be honest with you. Probably the 6.4 would be my biggest issue for the amount of money that people had to put into their vehicles to get them fixed, was the 6.4. The 6.0, I've seen people delete and have no issues with it all. Run like a scalded ape. Probably the best sounding motor that I've ever heard. Deleted, straight piped, wide open. Oh my god. That motor, it sounds like a freaking jet taking off. Going down the road, I'm like, whoa, shit, what was that? And they're like, oh, it was a 6.0. Go figure. I never really had any problems with the 500. The 500 really never, it was never really an issue car. The only problem I had with the 500 was 7 alternators later, and I ended up going with a AutoZone Gold that fixed the problem. But it was a time era thing with Ford. I love this 12 valve Cummins. I don't think it sounds as good as a 6.0. I mean, the 6.0s are just, I have a buddy that has a 1200 horse 6.0. It's a pull truck, the farm truck, and he does the tractor pulls with it. And that thing is just absolutely insane. I mean, he deleted it, ARP head studs. It's just strictly a show truck for, you know, just like racing type stuff, and it is just nasty, nasty, nasty. Yeah, Taurus X, I've heard of them, but I actually, believe it or not, I kind of like them. I thought they were kind of neat looking, but they were also ugly at the same time. Let's see here. What's a good way to prevent the 6.0 oil cooler from rupturing? Rupturing. Well, I've had the oil cooler. Don't they make like a kit for that? It's like an aftermarket kit that it's supposed to be like billet style, like you cannot destroy that thing. You guys want to see a cat fight? You want to see the 19-year-old boy cat whoop up on the girls, and then the girls get mad and then whoop him? Yeah, that 6.0, some of the guys at the tracks that have those 6.0s that are bulletproof, oh my god, man, they just sound like something that should be taking off from a tarmac. They're nasty. Yeah, the new 1.5s are super reliable. Mid 19 on, especially the new body style, we don't have any issues with them. Yo, you talking about the Pontiac Aztec? Oh my god, that was like the one of the ugliest vehicles ever made. The what was that? The PT Cruiser, that sucker was ugly. The HHR, that sucker was ugly. What did they call that? The Homo Hot Rod or something like that. And then the PT Cruiser was ugly. The Aztec was super ugly. I forget what. The Sunfire was ugly. That was an ugly car. But it seemed like every girl back in the day drove a Sunfire. Like, I talked to dudes and like, yeah, my ex-girlfriend drove a Sunfire back when I was like 20. Yeah, my ex-girlfriend drove it. Yeah, my ex. I'm like, oh my god. The vibe was ugly too. Well, it's serviceable depending on what dealer you're going to. If you want me to give you specifics on how it's done, I'll leave my email in the message box when this video loads, and then you can email me and I'll send you the pictures of how it's done directly. I didn't mind the Beretta though. I even like the earlier like 92, what was that, a Z, was that a ZR1 Cavalier or something like that? I had like a 3.1 liter and it was a manual, and that sucker was pretty quick. The G8 is probably one of the nicest cars I've seen so far. Like older cars. The Mercury Cougar, but if you took like what was it? They said if you took the power to weight ratio of the earlier model, like that 2 point something whatever V6 in the Mercury Cougar, and you compared it to like the power to weight ratio of the Mustang of its time, it was pretty comparable. They said that even though it was a junk box, it really did pretty well for what it was compared to some of the other sports cars during that time, because they didn't make a lot of power. So a lot of people would try to soup up those old Mercury Cougars, and they would do pretty decent with them. Z34, yeah, whatever it was. Yeah, the older cat, he's 19 years old, I think maybe 20 now, and he'll go around in the middle of the night when nobody's there to be accompanying him, like in his presence, and he'll just make noises all night because he gets lonely. He sleeps all day, and then when we're in bed, then he wants attention, and we're not there to give him attention, and he just groans all night because he wants somebody to stay up with him all the time. What's going on, Lincoln Maniac? I had a Corsica. I remember them, yeah. Hey guys, I'm gonna jump off of here. It's 10:30 at night. The old lady's in bed, and if I don't go in there and at least lay down with her, it ain't gonna be good for me. She wants me in bed, so I don't want to piss her off too much. It's my last day with her before I get to see her next weekend, and then we got a wedding and everything else going on. So I need to jump off of here and go lay down. Again. Booty calls, not necessarily that. It's just the right thing to do. She's in bed. I need to be laying down next to her. That's all. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all. It's a good trans. You just got to keep the fluid changed. That's all. Don't skimp on it. 6F35. Change it out. Good night. Look in my library. I show you how to change a 6F35 trans fluid. That's all, guys. Y'all be blessed. Love y'all. Have a great week.